have some check-ins between now and when we're completely wrapped up and you do your customized planning sessions individually with each of your job seekers. So as you get those scheduled, please let me know, and I would love to join you. Or and then I also want to be reviewing your staging record and your profile and your visual resume before you do that final meeting, just to give you that final look through and recommendations, looking for, the fidelity pieces that we've been training to all this time. So what we're going to talk about today is really just kind of this next step around the job development planning, the customized job development planning, and how that really is this bridge between discovery and then job development. And, really kind of that purpose, we've been building up to it, but then how you're going to use that. Then we're going to talk about the customized job development fidelity scale, and how, right, those components, it really is somewhat of a rubric for you to know that you are doing customized job development. Then we're going to talk about the differences between customized and traditional job development. And then we're going to get into some specific strategies that are customized and some ways to do employer engagement. And then finally, we're going to talk about what the VR counselor's role is in ensuring those best practices and the form that VR has developed to look and decide whether a job is customized or not. So that placement form, and Jason can really kind of speak to that. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So it is quite a bit, but it all kind of really just ties everything together that we've been talking about. So jump in with any questions you have along the way. This PowerPoint is on the Padlet, as well as the guidance document that has a little bit more kind of narrative to it that you can reference later. So really what we have wanted to do this whole time is, with doing discovery, and we do it with intention, that we find out who this person is, what their ideal conditions of employment are, what their vocational themes are that drive job development, right? So we're not just randomly looking at any job opportunity that exists out there, and what are the businesses in the community where it makes sense to go. So themes, and then businesses where it makes sense to go. So these are all the things that we're hoping that when we do discovery well, that we'll be able to answer these questions. So here's an example. And this is with Transcend, as another organization that does consulting and training at a national level, and a young man that they worked with named Ivan. And these are a little bit of the things that Ivan's file said about him. And then we're going to watch a little clip about it. This is it's kind of a news article or a little news story piece. So there's a little bit of the ableism threaded throughout, but don't focus on that. It's I want you to kind of look at the innovation, behind the position and the matching. So, but here's a little bit of the background here. So his file said he had cerebral palsy, limited fine motor skills, nonverbal, limited academics, good attendance. So he went to school. They didn't have a lot in terms of what he was able to learn at school. And he uses an electric wheelchair. So that's what they learned. That's what they got about him when they met this young man. And this is what they found out. Oh, and he had limited commuter skills, and he needed help with personal care. So typical, right? Have you all seen those files? We've talked about this, right? This is the information you typically get. This is nothing new, right? So this is what they learned in discovery. He's really active. He likes to be busy and go out. He has a really great smile. He's really friendly and a good sense of humor. He is learning to use a Dynavox, which is a speech accessibility device. He's a good driver in his electric wheelchair. He's very safe and conscientious. And he can count. He can do simple math and read familiar words. So that's a very different conversation than limited academics. He really likes sports, and he lives in Wisconsin, so he's really into the Packers. And is that right, Wisconsin? And the Bucks. Milwaukee specifically is the area that he lives in. And so this is a little story about him. So what they did is they, based on all those things that they learned about him, right? So he likes sports, he's a good driver, he likes to be out and about. They created this position for him at Marquette University. His brother played sports there. So he works 3 times a week. He wet mops the basketball courts and keeps score for intramural volleyball and basketball games. And so Positively Milwaukee did this story on him, and you can see some of the adaptations that they made to create the work that he's doing. So again, there's a little bit of ableism in the storyline, but don't focus on that. I'm just going to point it out because it's there and I know it, but that's not the point of the story. And get it to work.
That look is a look that can only happen by a roaring fire at a verbal cabin while the kids are sound asleep.
Innovative job is giving a young man independence and improving the quality of life for students at Marquette University. It's a story that is Positively Milwaukee. An employment opportunity at Marquette University is scoring high marks. These students playing hoops at the Marquette Recreation Center are playing on clean courts, all thanks to this young man, Ivan Lopez.
Yeah, keep going straight. Looks right, Ivan.
Ivan could actually be called the human Zamboni.
Make sure you make your turn smooth, okay?
Ivan is a young man with cerebral palsy, but he keeps the floors pristine, all thanks to a wet mop device attached to the back of Ivan's wheelchair.
Having him come in with a wet mopping situation to clean the courts really pays dividends for us.
And with the help of his job coach, Ivan wipes down the rec center's 5 courts.
All right, go ahead and make your turn.
And every Tuesday, you'll find Ivan here. He's dedicated and proud. A great job for this Marquette fan. And you also enjoy sports a lot, don't you, Ivan? Yeah. Ivan's brother Abraham is a Marquette University civil engineering student. He's inspired by his sibling and others living with disabilities.
They give me the strength to go on every day and do my best. So I'm very definitely proud to be his brother and honored. So it's a great blessing.
Ivan's wages are paid by the Wisconsin Division of Vocational Recreation. Job development and coaching is provided by Creative Employment Opportunities, or CEO. Edward Sheehy is a consultant.
If tax money, if state money is going to be spent to help people with disabilities, it should be to help them find work in the community rather than being isolated in a segregated situation.
And for John Sweeney, director of the Recreational Sports Center, this is personal.
When Ed first contacted me, I've got a daughter with special needs. And so that got my attention right away because I figured down the road, I'm going to need something for her. And if I don't step up now, then who will?
And Ivan is proof that with a little creativity and determination, those with disabilities can find meaningful jobs and become productive members of our workforce. So this is very rewarding for you.
It is. To be able to add one more person to what most of us already have and enjoy that is pretty rewarding.
And by the way, Ivan is also a scorekeeper for intramural indoor soccer games on Saturdays, and he does such an excellent job. And isn't this a wonderful program?
Man of many talents.
Yes, we should use more of these all over the city.
Way to go, Ivan.
Yes.
Okay. So when I say ableism, right, it
This
was
presentation focuses on the conditioner of the Zamboni ice resurfacing machine. We will discuss both the function and the maintenance of
This
the
is where I
conditioner
struggle
components
every
which
time.
apply to most of the conditioners
wait, pause it,
manufactured by
pause
the
it.
Zamboni company. Before we review the function and maintenance of the conditioner, we would like to focus on safety. Machine operators and maintenance people must
Is there a
know
tab at
about
the top you can close?
cautions and warnings contained in the Zamboni ice resurfacer operating instructions and service manual. Contemporary machines have detailed instructions in the manual.
There's part of it that made me feel that way too. But there's also a lot in there that I was like, but there's a lot of innovation in it and a lot of cool things that work. So it's a good example.
Right. I mean, the example was more about what his file said and then what they created for him right at
Oh,
Marquette.
yeah.
You know, there's some good things about it. So, and I wanted to have that conversation, right, where, and we see this all the time, where the story looks good and it was a good story and it is a good job. You know, the reporter did some things that weren't great, right? Like putting the hand on the wheelchair and kind of talking down to him a little bit. And, you know, but I think those are also good things for us to talk about so that when we see that, we can also kind of help people that we work with or that we support or colleagues do things differently, right? Like we're also in that we get those opportunities to support people when we know better that we can do better. So to me, it's always just good to have those conversations. Right? It's about the work piece and this employment element, but there's so much more around it, right? The culture, the conversations, the expectations that come with it. It's not just the job. So good comments and observations. Thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts they want to share about it?
I wish I would have seen the scorekeeping more that wasn't physical labor and see,
Yeah.
you know, they just like when they throw that in there. Scorekeeping is difficult. And I would have loved to seen him in that positive light, not just the cleaning one.
Right. What kind of adaptions are
Yeah.
you using for that? Like what kind of support does he get? Is it connect to his Dynavox? Like, yeah, that'd be really cool. And I could probably reach out to the folks at Transcend and get some more detail about that too, just as a follow-up. That's a great idea. So, right, a little bit more discussion about that. I think some of the reasons that he was successful is that because, right, they looked at his skills, but also his interest and personality and where he would fit. And while I don't think it, you know, we talked about how that commonality or how, you know, there are a lot of people that are connected and have family members and people they care about who also have, you know, have a disability or, you know, someone that they love and care about have a disability in their lives. And so it is one of the reasons that people say, gosh, you know, I have a family member or that's my son or daughter or my cousin or, you know, that personal connection. There is nothing wrong with that. And so, right, that coach talked about that. And so some of those commonalities that bring together, but there were also other attributes that he brought and that had value. So, you know, his brother was a student there, right? There were some other kinds of pieces. But I think, right, these are the things that we've talked about in terms of how you just define something as being customized. Any other things that you could think of how you would look at why this was a successful match?
I mean, like you said, I mean, he definitely loves that environment. He feels part of the team. It would have been nice. I mean, I'm criticizing the news piece at this point. It would have been nice to see how the team members felt about him, you know, being part of the team and that kind of stuff. But, you know, it was really more about, I don't know. I really would have liked to seen the piece where everyone supported him. Like literally, instead of people talking about him, I would have liked to seen that interaction. Right. You know, like the players coming out and saying he's great asset to the team or something in the locker room, or, I mean, is it just that he comes out and does this and, you know, that kind of thing.
Right. There were a lot of stuff we didn't get to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of the angle of the story. You're right.
Well, and I'm not so sure I agree with giving him a label, the human Zamboni. I mean, right. I hear you, but I mean, why do we have to label him? Why can't it just be Ivan, the great guy that, you know what I mean? That kind of was a little off-putting to me too. I'm like, we labeled him something, which was weird, but
Right.
Isn't
Yeah,
there an infamous Ivan? Ivan the Terrible?
Yes. So this is Ivan the human Zamboni.
Yeah, we don't want people associating with that probably. Look,
Yeah.
it's just Ivan.
It could have been Ivan the Wonderful. Anyway. Sorry, I'm gonna move today.
No, you're right though. And it's good. I mean, it was really right. It was more about the creativity of the position and how oftentimes, and we've had people that we've supported in the School to Work project or just in general who have presented with many of these same barriers, and people have said, this person is unemployable. I have no idea what they could do for work. And so, you know, to me, it was an opportunity to kind of highlight somebody who had some pretty significant barriers, and they you know, they really created something creative, but yet the angle of the story was not really the best. And so, but you could still kind of see those, you know, those adaptations, and then how, you know, how they got, you know, where they did in terms of that connection at Marquette, the brother going to school there, and, you know, using that enjoy the joy that he had around sports. All the things that we've talked about, right? Like who's in your life and what do they do for a living, or where are they spending time? So, you know, again, we've really talked about why we do this process, right? And how you can't jump to job development and you can't jump to themes if you haven't really spent time, you know, doing thorough and good discovery, right? Doing that home visit, doing the informational interviews, doing task-based discovery activities, knowing what benefits they have and how work's going to impact that. And, you know, you don't have to do an in-depth benefits analysis, you know, initially, but, you know, just really helping people understand what that's going to look like. So it's really important to do those pieces, and then recognizing that the themes and building those lists of 20 are the bridge to your job development, that it's not just this step you go through so that you can say, okay, I'm done with discovery. Now I'm going to just go ahead and go apply it, you know, jobs at McDonald's, right? Everything has a purpose, and there's a reason that we do it in the order that we do. This graphic really just kind of describes that. So, right, we're really kind of at that place in the process now that you're building your list of 20. So you've got your 3 themes. You're hoping to right now, typically one theme is stronger than the other 2, or they're overlapping a little bit. And you're basing that on, you know, where you found the strongest kind of information that you got from those discovery activities and your informational interviews and the advice that you got, and doing that vocational themes workbook. And then you, as you really got advice from those informational interviews and you asked who else you could talk to, right? That's kind of how you're building and mining that supply chain. So if you said, who else would you talk to? Who are your customers? You might be going down a little bit, and I'll show you some examples of that in a second here. Right, just not the obvious ones. For example, you know, Jackman seems to be more into horn instruments or those kind, not necessarily as much like string, but say he was really into playing the guitar. Maybe he would love to meet a luthier, or, you know, somebody who's building violins, or do you know what I mean? Like you could kind of go down that supply chain potentially. But you also got to use the connections of the job seeker and team members, and really kind of start asking those questions. Who do you know and who are you connected to? Right, this is where we talked about that you can't just do this alone. And when you come back to this group and say, hey, does anybody have anybody that they know or connected to, you know, somebody who is doing this kind of work, whether it's beekeeping or, you know, and you may come up to empty-handed, but it's worth asking those questions. And, this, and you want to do that in those employment planning meetings too, right? And we talked about how you engage the team members during that process, that you're going to list a couple places, but that you don't want to have them all filled in, because you really want to use those networks and use those questions like, well, if you don't know somebody, is there anybody that you're connected to that is operating these businesses or knows somebody or is doing this kind of work? And remember to use the term, we're just asking for advice. We're not necessarily looking for a job at this point, or, asking you for a job. We're just still looking for some advice. Okay. So we've already I've showed this graphic before when we were doing the vocational theme work, right, around transportation and entertainment, and how we're mining those supply chains. And digging deeper than just the places that you can Google or that you see on your on Main Street. Right, that have that retail component to it. So just it's always that challenge of digging deeper, thinking a little deeper. And that's always going to be my role, or hopefully other team members that you have, to be thinking beyond those traditional places that you think of. Who was telling me, I was having a conversation with someone, and I don't know very much about cars. Oh, it was my neighbor. And he's friends with a guy who his job is to go around and just set up the lighting for the anywhere that sells, is it Maseratis or Ferrari? Just the lighting in Ferrari stores, because it has to be just right. So if you're a dealer for Ferrari, they call this guy and he goes wherever that is and he sets up the lighting, because it has to be on the cars in a certain way. That's how he makes a living. I didn't know that that's how you could make a living, but that's a job for someone. I'm guessing he has a real interest in cars, right? Obviously. And I was like, I really want to talk to this guy to see what, how did he land where he is? Is it an electrician thing? Is it a car thing? Is it I don't know. But, I don't know about you, but I learn almost every day a job or something that somebody is doing that I had no idea that was something that someone could do to make a living. So we talked about this before, about how you job develop up the supply chain, right? And when people have those interests, around culinary, or, they want to be closer to the actual process, and we'll start with food or agriculture, and we go to a grocery store, and unless they're in one of those specialty departments, they're not really doing anything, right? They're opening boxes or bagging or doing carts, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not really connecting that person to that food or agriculture thing. Does that make sense? You've got to get closer to where those things are happening, right? So getting closer to a goat farm, the milking, or the caring of the goat, so kind of thinking about all of the different tasks that would be associated with a food and agriculture theme. So if you think about when we talked about for your customized employment planning meeting, and you're going to be engaging your team members to be thinking about tasks that are associated with the job seeker you're working with and their themes, that's what you're looking for, right? Is some of those tasks, right? Like milking, or, packaging, or cleanliness, or whatever it might be, portioning. So, those are the kind of, and you want to add a couple, but that's going to get you closer to some of the places that you might want to go versus jobs. It's by starting with the tasks. Does that make sense? Hi, Lynette. I've been recording.
So what I missed?
We've just been talking about just kind of connecting all of the pieces.
I didn't know we had a meeting today.
Oh, it's okay. I sent it with calendar invite and I didn't send a reminder, and I should have. I apologize. But I'm recording because Casey's on vacation, and so I'll send out the recording and you can grab the first few minutes. A lot of it was spent chatting. So
Thank
you're
you
just
so much.
Mhm. So we talked a little bit about, again, some of this stuff is repeat from where we were doing the customized employment planning work and how you're establishing those networks. But a lot of this is going to apply with your job development as well, right? That as you're doing the planning, this carries into your job development and how you're going to be doing the work. So you're looking at, you know, a lot of people that we support, they have people that they're connected to, and we talked about this, but we don't necessarily know how they're connected or what people do for a living, or ways in which they're, you know, connected, or those memberships that they might have in terms of groups. And oftentimes people are connected to disability specific groups, not necessarily groups that maybe can leverage a lot of social capital. So start thinking about how to expand people's memberships into groups that can expand their network and social capital. You know, if somebody's really interested in electronics or gaming, you know, helping them get connected to others who are doing that kind of work, or doing those kinds of interests outside of disability specific groups is important. Right, if somebody's into making beer, there's lots of beer clubs that people can join. And it's not even just about, right, it's not even always just about the actual activity. It's about connecting with others that have similar interests, and then how those relationships can lead to other things, right? What do you do for a living? Oh, I do this. Oh, well, I know somebody who does that, just the same way we make those connections, right? So again, this is a little bit of repeat from last time, but that all of these ways of connecting and expanding people's networks applies to customized job development as well. What's wrong, Wayne? So this is an example of lists of 20 for 3 themes. And this is out of a small town in Montana. So I did this list with Carrie, and it was based out of a town near the town where he lives in Montana, just outside of Missoula. So if you'll notice with transportation, construction, I know this is small, construction and culinary, it is not all just auto body or, you know, it's not all just the same things. It's a variety that covers transportation, right? There's upholstery, there's airport, there's go-karts, there's snow removal, right? It's very broad in terms of transportation. It doesn't mean all of those things make sense, but you're exploring, you know, what that could look like. Same with construction. You know, you're ranging from commercial to smaller kinds of things, to a zoning office, to equipment rental, right? All of the kinds of things that are associated in the theme of construction, not the actual construction companies, right? I wanted to give you this example so that your lists have some depth to them, and it's not all the same kinds of companies that you're just listing. Does that make sense?
So go, just so the three different themes. What if you don't haven't got to three themes yet?
Let's talk about,
Maybe I'm just not thinking out of the box enough. You know, I don't know.
I mean, it's hard when somebody has a really strong, I mean, I think everybody has really, typically will have one really strong, like,
Why do you have
really strong.
Okay. All right.
So a third could be not as strong, or it could be something that maybe crosses over into the other two. We can talk about it.
I would appreciate that.
What are you thinking?
Well, I know I've got two. But I think the third one, and I know you know some of the issues I'm having. I've done a little bit better. Just dropping off things at the house with a little note, you know, saying kind of in her things that she likes. But okay, no, I'll let you continue.
No, we can spend some time. I'll look at your staging record too and kind of look specifically for that particular piece. I know that there were some things that you were trying to do differently,
Right.
or, you know, dig a little deeper. So with that in mind, I will look again.
And thank you. And I know this is kind of outside of what the rest of what we've talking about, but our meeting with you, I wanted to say thank you and for the leverage, because I got the sweetest text back from her from the last thing. And like, I've just been leaving little things on the doorstep, not even, you know what I mean? Just here, thought about you today, you know, thought about this, thought about that. Well, the mother just sent me the sweetest text. The first couple of times, thank you, but the last one was, so I think I just wanted to say, I think we're making some headway.
Good. Just to kind of fill Kadisha and Dan and Lynette really felt like she was struggling with connecting. And so she made some, just kind of went with her gut of just kind of trying to do some little things to connect with her job seeker. And it sounds like it's making a difference in terms of trust and building rapport.
And it's kind of, and the whole family, you know. I did include the younger brother, so I thought about him, but this way he's like, he'll say, oh, Paola loves that, you know, and so there's more information, you know what I mean? And so I didn't see that coming, and I didn't see, it's like, oh yeah, well, she loved it because she knows she what. Anyway, I'll talk to you about it later, but it was kind of cool. It was kind of
great. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that.
Right.
So just some ideas, right, of it being a little bit different, right? So in the culinary, you've got things from goat cheese to coffee to a creamery to the USDA inspector's office to the ag extension, right? You're really trying to broaden here. And again, these are places where you're listing about the opportunity. And if there's some connections there in terms of people in this person's circle knowing some folks, or, well, I don't know anybody at Eat Wild Game Processing, but I know someone who has their own jerky company that's called this. Great, let's contact them, right? You're sparking ideas by getting some of these, you know, places down. And it does seem a little, you know, not strange, but they're very broad, right? But when, again, we limit ourselves by only listing the same places, just with different, like, you know, 10 bakeries with different names versus a variety of places where culinary activity is happening. So again, these are all the things that kind of build into making something and leading us into customized job development. So using what we've learned from discovery, uncovering skills and abilities, figuring out what conditions of, you know, the best conditions of employment, identifying those vocational themes, confirming that in the planning meeting, developing our list of 20, and that is going to evolve. You don't have to have your list of 20 complete when you go into that planning meeting. In fact, I will hope that you don't have it all the way done, because you're going to want to take some of that input from the team and maybe refine it a little bit, right? As you get advice, or, you get some of that, those supply chains as you're getting advice from people. And then that will lead you, and you use those lists of 20 for your job development. As you start doing job development, if you're not using any of your lists of 20, what is the point of doing all of that work? Right. And it's also going to be, we talk about what the VR counselor is looking for. When you get a placement, if you didn't pull from those lists of 20, if you didn't use any information from discovery, it's going to be hard to justify how something is customized. So we'll talk more about that, but it's why we want to be using all of this information as we're building into job development. Do we need to take a little break, or are we doing okay?
I would love 5 minutes.
Okay, let's take
or
5
even 2.5.
Okay, let's take 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Trish, first of all, how is Moki doing okay now? Or better, I guess. Absolutely.
All right. So this next little bit is, so we talked about, right, we've used the discovery fidelity scale as kind of as our rubric for the content as we've gone through the discovery process. And there's a customized job development fidelity scale as well. And this really is another really just kind of a blueprint for you as you're doing customized job development. Also owned and developed by Griffin Hammes. And we have not done any of the job development fidelity scale work yet in our state, but this is a little bit of the history about it. So it was just finalized in 2019 after several revisions. So Easter Seals, Southern California, Debbie Ball, they provided financial support and guidance, and then worked with Utah State University and Griffin Hammes to really just kind of finalize the JDFS, and went through, really kind of looking at the details of both customized and traditional job development practices. And they came up with 13 customized job development fidelity tenets. So just like the DFS, there's systems fidelity and services fidelity. And Aubrey's involved in that fidelity work. So if there's anything that I'm misspeaking to, please jump in, Aubrey. Just a little bit of the background there. And we're going to focus more on the services piece, right? The systems fidelity that gets to, right, the funders side of things. So VRDD, who's ever funding the job development, and how that's looking, and how, just as far as the best practices there. So this is really kind of what it looks like in terms of, just those foundational pieces, that it's really supposed to be that you follow the discovery employment plan, right? Just what we've talked about, that you hold that meeting, and then that you really jump into job development, and best practices that you avoid a lot of the pre-placement thing, like volunteering, job tryouts, paid or unpaid work experiences. We have done, right, some of the students in the School to Work project, we have, there have been some internships that have kind of been somewhat of an expanded discovery, but it's certainly been more part of the discovery process versus part of the job development process. So there's some distinctions there. But really that's kind of the intent, right? Businesses with good jobs benefit from customized job development. So these are just some of these values based pieces that have been established within the job development fidelity scale. And I think the thing that I really love about this is it really just kind of defines the difference between and what makes something customized, right? It's different than finding jobs and filling out vacancies. We're not basing something on, just the skills and tasks that the employment seeker has and then finding, what somebody has. We're creating jobs and then utilizing the employment seeker skills and capacities to address the business needs. We are hiring people because it benefits the business, not to give them a chance, right? It's evidence-based tenets within the customized employment fidelity scale ensures that job development practices are benefiting the seeker and the employer. We are creating, carving, negotiating a good job. It's based on that mutual employee and employer interest. And that customized job development is one component of the integral approach to a person, with significant disabilities. We're using informational interviews, interest-based negotiation, and then some of those value-added assets to a job. So like if there's tools or resource ownership, some of those things that we talked about, some of the examples like the embroidery machine, or I think I give an example later about iPads that we purchased for Chelsea in a school. So again, just some of these are the foundations of the tenets of customized job development. So this looks very similar to the DFS, right? That 1.1 is that it's customized job development is based on the Discovery Employment Plan. That is also in the Form 144. That's one of the things that VR is looking for when they decide whether they're going to pay you a customized placement fee. 1.2, it's developed based on dedicated financing. So, right, you get an enhanced payment, or I don't know what the right term is. I apologize, Jason. Right, that it's a higher payment if it's determined that it's customized. Right, so these are all the things that say whether something is customized or not. Did I say that correctly, Jason?
Yeah, you get paid more for customized.
But right, you've got to demonstrate, and that's one of the tenets.
Yeah,
that
we look at it. There's a special form for customized, and I have to approve it personally. So I just basically make sure that it follows. Tenets is a good word for it. But yeah, sometimes it could happen. You're doing customized, and it maybe turns out to not be so customized. But for the most part, when those forms come in, I review it with the provider and even with the VR counselor, and we make sure that it's a customized placement, and that's why you get paid $1,000 more for it. Maybe more than that total, anyway.
But the point is, right, if you're negotiating, if you're creating, that's very different than just filling out something that exists. So you should get paid more, right? It's more work. It's a more specialized process. Developing resources, whatever, creating a negotiation plan. I mean, that's, this is a high level service. So if you're doing that and demonstrating it, then there's value there. So the customized job developer is qualified to provide customized job development, right? You're getting this training, you're demonstrating that you have, or that you're able to provide customized employment. So that's one of the tenets, that you are getting specialized training. And the other one says, the next tenet is that the agency delivering customized job development ensures the relationships are based on the discovery plan between the job seeker and the community members. So again, everything is tying back to what you did in discovery. in customized job development. This other piece I think is really important is that transportation is addressed in your customized job development, and that you're considering that piece. And whether, you know, that either the job seeker is self-directing the transportation, or you're just making sure that those pieces are taken care of. I can't tell you how many times transportation has gotten in the way, or not having it coordinated has gotten in the way of somebody with a job. So many times, and it's not typically the employment specialist's fault. It's right, all the other pieces just not kind of coming into play or not being considered quickly enough.
May I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So when we're looking at this scale of +1, +2, +3, where does this fall in? Why are we looking at a scale of 1 to 3?
So the scale in terms of scoring is acceptable is this, that's the minimum, right? So acceptable is that the provider of customized job development ensures that there is transportation, like that's acceptable.
Right.
If
Are we looking at an end result score here to be within range?
Yeah, so the total fidelity score. So what would happen, and we'll do this with discovery, and then eventually I think we'll get to reviewing customized job development plans as well, is that we would go through and say, we review your job development plan or your job development strategy. And we would say, Dan did all of these things, and then this would be your fidelity score.
Gotcha. And what is the range? What is the range, Tricia?
Between, I need to look at the total. Aubrey, do you know it off the top of your head?
No, of course not. I know.
Sorry.
I'm like, I will say that each of these scores build off of each other. So, and transportation is a tricky one. So this one is actually being revised. Yeah, there you go. But other ones such as 2.1, let me just make sure. Yes. Acceptable is kind of like Tricia said, it's the base, and good includes acceptable. So it's not acceptable or good or exemplary. If you're looking at exemplary, it means all three of those are in place. It's not just exemplary. All three have to be true. Does that make sense?
Right. So I'm guessing if there's 13 fidelity tenants, would that be 13 times 3, 39 is a perfect score? And we need to be in a range. Am I guessing wrong?
Let me bring up our.
Well, I mean, I think minimally acceptable, right, is what you're hoping to get acceptable at least. But I know that you can have some where.
So we're 13 to 39.
Yes.
So 26 would be, I'm sorry, I'm a numbers guy.
No, you're fine. I mean, the point is that.
So we're looking 26 to 39 is where we want to be. That's a sweet spot. That's between good and exemplary.
Right. But it's also, you know, if you have places where you didn't meet fidelity on a certain tenant, it doesn't mean that you fail altogether. It just means that that specific tenant wasn't met.
Right.
You're seeing whether it's in the services side or the system side that we just reviewed.
Right.
You know,
but what is this? What is the so what is the scale set up for? Are we looking at you know, this person had a fidelity score of 28. We need to work on certain things. Is it a way of establishing like a baseline of where we are and how can we improve?
It is very much the goal, right, is that we have people doing discovery and job development to fidelity, right? It's a quality measure, right? It's just like when you do quality reviews or a rubric, right? When you do an assignment and you say, this is how we know this is a good outcome or a good product.
Right.
You did all of these things. And so it's really kind of a good way for you going forward to know, because I think that that's been the challenge with customized as it's come out, and it's, comparable to IPS, which is an evidence-based model and has years and years and years of research, and they've done fidelity, and you have to do it to fidelity, and there's all these reviews that happen in order to be considered an IPS site. It's because they built it into that process, and so you can really see what those measures look like. They didn't do that with customized in the beginning, and so we're doing it now. We're going back and kind of trying to establish this consensus of what is fidelity, and how do we know that somebody's doing it well, which is a challenge where there's so much nuance to this work, right? You have to be creative, you have to be innovative to do customized work, and it's with one person at a time. So there are a lot of things that are hard to measure, but we've come up with these pieces that we know are, and we're still kind of testing some of them out, right? In terms of getting, the research is still coming in, and we're part of that, right? With this training, but by building it into the training and saying, this is what we're looking for, and this will be your guide as you continue to go forward. And you're learning and say, did I do this? Am I going back to my staging record when I'm doing development? Did I go back to my list of 20? Because I can tell you in the past, we've not seen that. People do the staging record and then they never look at it again, which doesn't make any sense, right? So as we developed this training and our model, we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that connection. And we really spent time focusing on, let's not do all this work of discovery and then go apply for a job at McDonald's, because we kept seeing it over and over and over again.
Right. And that's what I think is interesting about customized employment, is that we're really putting value on the process, where in versus a traditional job placement, we're putting value in getting the job. So you're like, do we have a success story with Bill? Yeah, he has a job. But in this situation, it's like the success story is the development. It's the discovery. So I like that you're putting value on the process versus, does he have a job or not? You know what I mean? Because that's usually the end result.
Right.
And that's why I was curious about the rating scale, because I think it's a little bit intimidating when you look at it, because I'm the kind of guy that, of course, I want threes, but but the range is there, which is great, because then you could, when you have your score, you could say, well, 2.1 is at a 1. So let's really focus in that area so that we can get better. And then a 2.2, we're good. We have a 3, it's great. So I do like this scale. And I was just wondering how much it comes into play at the end of it all. When you look at it and you go, okay, the fidelity score is 27 or whatever. I was just wondering, is it set up that you are able to pick apart where the weaknesses are? Or is it all kind of, because if you really look at it, a lot of the differences between 2.1 and 2.2, I mean, it's slight, they're not huge things. It's all about the development. So yeah. Are you able to be able to look at a score and say, okay, well, this is, this needs reworked, or
and we're definitely hoping, so part of the research that Tim and I are working on is looking at this scale and whether or not also the tenants work together, and if you take one out, how that affects the scale altogether. And so that is part of it. And if certain tenants don't meet that criteria, then we either have to redo them. So Griffin Hammis, who developed this, they go back in, they rewrite it, we test them again, or we take them out altogether. and if we take them out, does that help? Because the scale, like you said, it has to all work together. If you pull one
Right.
out, then the scale no longer works altogether. Or if you add a new one in, then it could, but maybe it doesn't work anymore. And so, yes, the hope is that we can get this to a point where each tenant, if you were to take it out, the scale no longer works. So it has to be in there, and that would work, that it does work all together. And that includes both the services and the systems. So if anything on the systems level gets taken out, then obviously on the services side, your scale no longer maybe works, and it's hard to understand what's going wrong and where, versus if it's all working together, then you should be able to pinpoint, okay, here's where our score is, where the minuses in our score, here's where it's coming from and what we can work on to get to that. Because yes, you're right. Otherwise, if something's taken out and maybe, yes, you got a 2 on this, but that's because something in the services is not working, or in the systems is not working for you to get to the exemplary in services, then of course that's something that's out of your control now. And that's where your score, like that's, it all has to work together, like you said, in order for that to come together. So that's what we are working on right now, is ensuring that this is a scale that actually does do that and gets at where we want it to be, and gets to the ultimate question of, is this working and what can we do better next time, or what
Are
do
you
we
seeing-
work on this time?
Are you seeing any data where there is a score that is accomplishing what you want done? Or is this such a diverse population that we're working with that it's really hard to kind of get a median score?
So that's we are right in the middle of just establishing the scale in general.
Mhm.
And we've wanted to start looking at outcomes, and as
Yeah.
soon as we started looking at outcomes, that's when COVID hit. And so it just has not, that's our next step in this, is to start looking at whether or not scores are relating to outcomes, and whether or not, of course, that's all working. And so I will keep you updated, because we hope that once, and things are starting to go back a little, like there's a lot of jobs out there right now, and there's a huge staffing shortage. So we're hoping that we can start getting better data on that, but it's just, it was really hard because we literally started collecting that as soon as COVID hit, and then we had to pause it because we couldn't do we couldn't do research on any in-person, even our research can't be an in-person, and we couldn't do research that was on in-person interactions, which all of this kind of requires. And so we'll let you know whether or not that is the case.
Awesome.
We
Thank you. I
sure
was just
hope-
curious.
We sure hope so. Yeah.
Thank
No.
you for your questions, Dan. I think
Yeah,
these are
that's
all
good.
really,
Yeah.
really good, because what it tells me is, right, that you care about it, you want to do it right. And I mean, it really is, I think when things get established and we get further down the road, one of the many challenges has been, not only do employment specialists need, right, this guidance, and as you're learning and continuing to do the process, managers and, programs, as you're building, having this, these guideposts really, can just strengthen your program and say, are we doing these things? Really just kind of just help set this is what the expectation is. So this
Well,
first
having the data of, I hope, Aubrey, I hope the data shows that, a successful score is a 28 or whatever, because then that really gives you an opportunity to look at something, score it, and say, wow, we're falling short and it's not going to be successful. I hope that that's the data that comes out, because that would be extremely helpful to be able to shoot for a certain score that is giving you a high probability of placement.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be awesome.
I hope too. We hope it's really clear.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay, scores at this rate are getting this success level.
Exactly.
And
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree.
So this first tenant is really looking at how you're using those representational materials, right? So the visual resume, and you're deciding how you're going to use that, whether it's with an employer. This one, obviously, we've talked about how customized employment does include a person developing a small business. We've not focused as much on that. In this course, we focus more on wage employment and, of course, resource ownership being part of that. But that, how you're doing that, and then the different levels to which you're doing that. The next 2.2 looks at the financial plan, how you are making sure that a person understands what benefits they have, and using those, whether it's a past plan or other kinds of things. So, right, one of the questions in the staging record is, is the person going, seeing a benefits planner? So then this would be in the development side. Are you using that information in your job development? And if you are not, that's okay, right? It's not necessarily something that you need or have to do, especially if somebody's not using, some of those benefits. I mean, most of the time people need to take those into consideration, right? Especially if they're getting a waiver or housing. I mean, those kinds of things have to be considered. So you're most likely going to be meeting at least the acceptable +1 because you are, acceptable, because that's something that you're just going to be doing, right? Helping them coordinate and report income and, all those kinds of things just are basic that you would be doing. And talking about what their financial goals, right? How many hours they want to work, those kinds of things. So then, right, that's what we're talking about next in terms of your job development is the number of hours they want to work, and then non-work kind of related services and support. We've talked about how important it is to address some of those non-work support needs, and how that does impact work. And if that's not something that you're going to do, how do you coordinate with other services and supports that the person has? And how do you document that in your job development? If you remember in our job development planning, one of the pieces in that planning document was the off-the-job supports pieces and how we were going to address that. So again, I talked about this in the last course, is as I looked through these the fidelity tenets, I really tried to make sure that I addressed, in some of the supporting documentation that I gave you to use, that I was addressing these pieces to make sure that I'm helping you to be able to do this work to fidelity, right? If I don't train you, or if I don't give you this information, and then you get low fidelity scores at some point, then that's a poor reflection on how I'm training or how I'm teaching you to do this work. So it's something I'm also going to come back and be reviewing. If people's scores are consistently low in certain areas, that means I also need to improve the training or the pieces that we're doing and strengthen some of those areas, right? It's not just the service delivery, it's also how are we teaching the information, and we probably need to do some of those things differently. So it's looking at 2.4 is looking at how is the job developer meeting with the business to identify the fit between the workplace culture, tasks, and skills, and the employment seeker's ideal conditions of employment. So how are you documenting that when you're developing that job? And a lot of these things are on the form 144. So, and we'll talk about that. So as you fill that form out, a lot of these tenets are going to be addressed when you're completing that form. So it talks about informational interviews during the job development phase in 2.5 tenet, that you're doing a task analysis for job tasks, coworker supports, any sort of training when the employment is likely. So you're documenting that. And the training plan, we talked about that. That you're creating a proposal when need be with the business of what that might look like, whether it's economic advantages or other kinds of benefits that might work with an employer. And I have a couple of examples that we're gonna go through and I'm gonna share with you in terms of an employment proposal and what that might look like. You're gonna wanna demonstrate that you're creating a job site training plan, right? That you're looking at job tasks, required skills, and new skill development that they might need, and then support strategies that the employer might need, whether it's communication or working with other coworkers. Is it transportation, getting to and from work? So what are those, the training plan looking like? And these are all things that you're comfortable or familiar with doing, I'm assuming. Okay, so that's really kind of it for the tenants. Do we need to take another little break before we go into the next section? Are we okay? Want a little break? Keep going?
I'm good. If I don't know how everybody else feels.
All right. Hi, Cal.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I had another meeting I had to be on this morning.
Chris, can I take 5 minutes and I'll be right back?
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much, you guys.
Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
How is your dog?
Oh, she's good.
Good, good.
Well, I mean, she's just becoming more and more wild by the day, but overall, she's good.
Good.
Okay, we've talked a little bit about some of the differences, I think, already between a traditional approach to job development and then a customized approach. And I think it's one of those things, right, that it's good to just go over them again. So for the sake of not writing out traditional job development 6 times, I made an acronym TJD and customized job development. So I just kind of put those together, side by side. And so, in traditional job development, we typically will use assessments or work trials or on the job training or volunteering to kind of assess somebody's capabilities. And we do that a little bit, with customized. We assume employability or that people can work, but we use discovery activities to kind of figure out how best to support someone and how best they learn to ensure an ideal fit versus, some of those other traditional methods. Oftentimes, with traditional job development, there's already kind of a relationship that exists with employers or places, and people will kind of plug in some vacancies with people, right? So they'll kind of have this relationship and just, plug people in. With customized, you are really just developing something with an employer that meets that person's ideal conditions of employment. It doesn't mean that you may not have a relationship with an employer from the past or something like that, but it really is based on, that person in that moment more typically. With traditional job development, we're basing it on an employer's willingness to hire somebody with a disability to fill a job opening. Versus customized, we're using that informational interview approach and learning about more what the employer, is what's happening in that business, the work, and other employers who do similar work. So trying to find those commonalities with the expectation that businesses are always hiring. It's just a matter of finding the right fit and identifying unmet needs. With traditional, we're not looking at how, we're looking at just how somebody's going to be able to fit a list of job duties, right? Here's the job description and how somebody's going to be able to meet that. Sometimes you can negotiate a few tasks here or there in traditional, but for the most part, you're just, you know, filling out a list of job duties. With customized, you are very much negotiating a job based on a proposal that accounts for the job seeker's unique skills, their interests, the supports that they have might available, that they might have available, and then, you know, either coworker or cultural fit to ensure success. You're really kind of putting together a proposal based on what you've observed. You're somewhat of as a consultant, an expert, saying, this is how I think this person can benefit your business based on what I've seen, and identifying unmet needs. It really is a higher level skill than traditional job development. So with traditional job development, you're assuming the responsibility to develop a job site training plan and teach it to the job seeker after they hire. And that typically belongs to the employment specialist or job coach, not the job developer. With customized, that typically will stay with the customized employment specialist until that stabilization period happens, because it's a higher level of negotiation and training typically happening before that handoff will happen to the coach. Does that make sense? So the job developer is doing a little bit more of that training plan than the traditional approach. So you might stay on site a little bit longer with that training plan with customized than you will in a traditional approach. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions about that or understood that to be different? Okay. So we've talked a lot about, you know, going to smaller businesses, right? Because you can talk to decision makers. You have the ability to customize things. You can do that a little bit still with larger retailers, but it's harder, right? Anytime there's a big HR kind of corporate system, it's harder to do that. Anytime you have major formalized application processes or group interviews or things like that, it's a little trickier, unless it's a formality and they tell you, well, everybody's got to do this, but we're going to negotiate. And, you know, unless they kind of tell you it's a formality, but they're willing to customize something, you typically want to avoid those processes. Oftentimes, you know, you're doing a sales pitch with traditional methods. You're completing those applications. You're asking if people are hiring. You're going through HR. You're filling out openings and, you know, looking through job descriptions. With customized, you're using that visual resume and customizing that to the places that you're going. You're, like I said, using the application as just a formality or a necessary process. You're really looking for those unmet needs, things that are not getting done that really match what your job seeker can contribute. You're doing a lot of analyzing and negotiation versus just looking at job descriptions. And you're looking at the themes, right? You're looking broader instead of those job descriptions, and then trying to find the associated tasks. So those are some of the biggest differences. So we've already talked about how discovery really creates those overarching themes that have this much broader collection of possible jobs. And how we really try to connect over shared interests and connecting with employers to connect to potential employees in the same way, right? So that we're not just having that typical relationship that they might have. We're circumventing HR departments most of the time. We're trying to talk directly with decision makers or business owners. We have the notion that employers are always hiring, but they're always hiring people that have similar interest values and those who can generate profits. We are looking at ways to use a person's skills. We're looking at the ways that they can have the ability to learn new skills, and that is critical to job creation. Right? Those are some of those values in the methods that we use. So really, I mean, the foundation of it is that the employment is built on the match, right, between the personal contribution that the person is going to make and the needs of the workplace. If we're overemphasizing the selling of this person, we're missing the point of customized employment. Right? We're not trying to convince somebody to hire this person. It's not a sales approach. You know, it really is that this it just makes sense, right? So really what we know, or how we build something, or how we build customized job development, is how we know the job seeker, right? It's why we spend so much time with them in discovery. And so then we have to do the same thing as we build knowledge of the business, right? It's built from doing an informational interview. It's observing others on the job. It's scheduling follow-up visits. It's completing a job and task analysis, right? How else do you know what that person can offer, or where some of those gaps are? How could you improve efficiency, increasing revenue, if there's some equipment or something that this person could bring? Preparing, planning, and negotiating, and then creating a proposal, right? It's the same kind of a thing that we've had to do in terms of getting to know the job seeker with discovery, is that you've got to do the same kind of thing in terms of how we get to know a business and finding that right fit. It's why you're getting, you know, paid a higher level or a higher outcome payment to do customized job development. It's because these kinds of skills take a little more time and nuance to be able to go in and analyze and figure that out. But you're doing it based on what you know about the job seeker and then how they're going to fit in. Does that make sense? Okay. So we talked a little bit about resource ownership. Do you remember the interview I showed you with Buckhead Threads, where Nancy talked to the guy? He had the screen, I think he was doing t-shirts or something, and she had a job seeker who ended up doing like an embroidery, adding embroidery to that business. That's one example. So resource ownership is essentially, this is the definition, a mutually beneficial process of acquiring materials, equipment, or skills that when you match it to a job seeker's interest and then a customer need, generates profits for the employer and then wages for the employee. So it's a wage, it's connected to a wage job, but there's a piece of equipment or something that increases profits that will then pay the wages and creates this employment relationship of mutual need, obligation, reward. So one example that we did locally here in Utah, this was, you know, a couple of years ago when we were doing early demonstration projects, is a young woman by the name of Chelsea. She had a job at an elementary school. She was working in the office, but she really wanted to be working with directly with the children more than doing some of the office work. And she still did some of the office work, but she worked for a school and they didn't have a lot of resources. But what we did is we purchased 4 iPads for her that she owned. And then we purchased educational apps to put on these iPads. And they created a position for her to work with preschool up to 1st grade, I believe. And she would take 4 kids at a time and, supplement the, kids in these classrooms and pull them out and do some of these educational apps. And so because they were her resources, and then we created these additional hours for her at the school. They had some additional aid hours, but they didn't really have the money for the iPads. And so this was something that she brought to the, to the school. And she did that job for quite a while and had support from a job coach. What the job coach would do was help her make sure she updated the apps and would update, getting different apps, as the kids would get bored of them. But Chelsea was really good at kind of keeping the kids in line and making sure that they, were doing what they were supposed to be doing on the iPads. But we did discovery with her and knew that she had, an interest and skill in working with children. She also had an interest in technology. She did a lot of stuff on Facebook. She, so we kind of blended some of those interests and skills together by using the technology and then her interest in working with children. And she probably did that. She had that position, gosh, I think 5 or 6 years. And then she kind of decided she wanted to do something different. So I think the school ended up, I don't know, they purchased the iPads from her, whatever, what ended up happening. And then she decided she wanted to do something different, but it was a really great position for her for a long time. And that was an example of resource ownership, where they were her iPads. If the school decided that they didn't want to keep doing that for her, she could have gone and proposed that to another school. And she knew that. She knew they were hers. She knew that was her resource. And she took very good care of them. She made sure the kids took good care of them. We did a news story. It was a feature story similar to the one that they did with Ivan. And it was really quite interesting because as she was getting interviewed, the kids were doing something on the iPad and the interviewer was asking her a question and she could kind of hear some of the kids kind of acting up a little bit. And she stopped the interview, like I said, just a minute, please. She got up and went over and kind of got the kids, back in line and doing what they needed to be doing, and then came back and sat down and finished the interview, and just like no nonsense. And she was this, small, just bright woman that, you wouldn't expect her to kind of command this group of young kids, but she did. She was just like no nonsense, but in the interview, she very much made sure that they knew that the interviewer, that the news anchor knew that those iPads were hers and that was her resource and that was what she brought to the table. And the reason I wanted to share that, it was because it was something that she was proud of, and it created this position for her. She still worked in the office, but it gave her more hours. She was doing something she wanted to do. One thing that we learned is that just like anybody else, she wanted, it worked for her for a while, and then she wanted to do something else, and we didn't think what the other thing might be. And so then we didn't really plan very much for kind of building that career or expanding that for her. And so when she got tired of it or wanted to do something else, we didn't do a very good job of planning. And so then she was just kind of done. And so that's kind of where we went wrong with that. But it wasn't, it certainly wasn't, I mean, the iPads cost, I don't know however much iPads cost. It was less than $1,000 for all of those iPads. And I think she worked, 15 hours a week, which she wasn't working that many hours before. So in terms of the return on investment, it certainly was worth it. And, but just that idea that just because you do something, you make it, just like anybody else, that somebody doesn't have to do something forever to make it worth it. Is that what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to say. But you do need to kind of have those check-ins in terms of career planning and growth that we didn't do with her and we should have. So kind of some lessons learned there. I need to find some photos. I have them. They're just kind of old and I think on another drive because I did that work when I was at the DD agency. Okay. Informational interviews. We're doing these during the job development phase too, not just in discovery, right? Informational interviews are something I hope that you always do, even when you are not actively, you know, I mean, I'm sure you're always actively going to be working with job seekers, but even if you don't have anybody you're specifically, you know, looking, you know, working with directly, I hope you're always doing informational interviews just to keep that skill up. I think it's a great way to stay connected to your business community and just see what's going on out there and stay connected to businesses and just to keep the skill of informational interviews up. I do it. I don't do it formally, but when I go places, I find myself trying to find somebody to talk to and get information and have some of those conversations with people. Tell me more about this, you know, whether it's a farmer's market or, you know, just when you get your hair done or, you know, whatever it is, I hope that you continue to practice and do those informational interviews. But especially in job development, it's really, really important. And you always want, right, to be able to go back. Yeah.
Can I just say that farmers markets are active right now, and as we're job seeking and as we're developing and as we're seeking information, I just think that is a wealth of information. And I just wanted to say, I appreciate you bringing it up because last Saturday I went to our local farmers market and I was stunned. I was stunned. It was like, oh, wow. It was just a wealth of information and makes you start thinking outside of the box and makes you start thinking. It was quite eye-opening for me.
I'm amazed at how hard people work. When I go to a farmer's market and I see how much goes in to setting up and products and all of that, I just get tired just thinking about it. And I go, Kelly, you've done some of those things with your art, and it is not easy to make a living that way. So, right, that's people that have passion and interest, and
they really want to talk to you. That's the cool thing is sometimes they have a bit, you know, they have a brick and mortar business, but they're bringing it to the farmers market, and that's when you're really going to get the information from them, and that's when they want to talk to you.
Right. Right. But I love, you know, just those reminders of, you know, you're a consultant, you're a problem solver. You know, we use the term job coach but you're more than that. And remember that, right? You are there to help businesses solve problems and be a consultant. But you have to gain understanding of the business and what they're doing before you can offer solutions, right? So just kind of keep those things in mind all the time. So negotiation, right? We talk about that. And it really begins when you as the job developer start seeing ways that the job seeker can contribute to the business in ways that are valuable, right? When you go into somewhere and you're talking with somebody and you can start thinking, okay, this is I could really see, you know, Pale is really good at organizing, or and she could just get this whole section into shape or whatever it is, right? And then you start thinking about what that negotiation could look like, whether it's a couple hours, whether it's, you know, but you have to really be confident, right? In what their skills are, in what you could teach them. Don't always think about just what they can do, but what can be taught and how you can teach them well, right? None of us know exactly what to do or how to do things perfectly the first day on the job, and nobody expects that. So always think about what can be taught as well, okay? What's wrong way? So negotiation can happen if it saves money, if it can make money, if it can lead to efficiency and, you know, having things run more efficiently. if it increases the customer base or it improves customer relations, right? Any of those things are reasons that negotiation can happen. So it doesn't always have to be about money, but there has to be something that affects, you know, the bottom line or things that business cares about. So you have to know what it is that they care about or what's important. So with interest-based negotiation, you want to, you know, it really is going to require, right, a lot of that advanced preparation, knowing what you've learned in discovery, your informational interviews, the job task analysis. You're really understanding a lot. You want to understand a lot of that. You want to be able to highlight and understand what matters to the business owner, looking at profit, solving problems. This is where you're really pulling in your smooth listening skills. You're really listening to some of those, pulling out some of those questions and listening to what's coming next. What are they worried about? What's not getting done? What do they need? If they had $10,000, what would they do with it? What equipment, you know, what's coming in the future? Who are their competitors? You know, and then building trust. Do we need a break? Yes? Okay, let's take a quick
5
break.
minutes would be nice.
Okay, let's do 5 minutes. I'm gonna go check on my dog. She got quiet. All right, we're getting to the last little leg here. Okay, so this next piece is talking to employers and identifying opportunities. So just to kind of recap, we've started kind of talking about the negotiation part and why is this not going? Okay. So now we're going to kind of dig a little deeper. And so this data is from 2016. And when I looked to see if there was more updated information, it was still fairly consistent. I would imagine COVID's probably hit a little bit in terms of the number of employers. But I would expect it's still fairly similar in terms of the percentages of small businesses. So according to the Census Bureau, there were 5.6 million employer firms in the United States. Of those, firms with fewer than 500 workers accounted for 99.7% of those businesses. Then firms with fewer than 100 workers accounted for 98.2%. Right, so it just keeps going down, and then firms with fewer than 20 made up 89%. So the point is that, right, we all go to, right, everybody's looking at Target and Walmart and, you know, the big box stores, but yet so many employers with fewer than, you know, 100 people or even 20 people are where largest gains are in terms of adding jobs. Again, that may have changed a bit with COVID, maybe not, I don't know. I think, right, we're not going to know how all of that's going to shake out for a while, but in terms of small business and you know, the numbers have not changed a lot, but yet it's not where a lot of job developers go. So it's kind of that reiteration of rethinking of the places and where you go. I think it's always important to kind of, when you think about who is making up the businesses in this country, smaller businesses are really where it's at. So with customized, right, we've talked about how much it is about that mutual beneficial relationship and that we're creating new positions based on the need of the employer and then the skills and the interests of the job seeker. And we're basing it on what we know about the job seeker and their profile, not the jobs that we know. It's about opening new doors and new jobs. It doesn't mean that you don't maybe know some of the places or some people, but we're not just relying on those particular jobs that we know. It really requires you as job developers to gain an understanding of how a business works and identify unmet needs or more cost-effective ways to do things or ways to work. It requires you to evaluate the goodness of fit for the job seeker and then present solutions, right? And the benefit of hiring. And then the candidate, right? So you're going in and saying, I have a solution. Here's the benefit of hiring. And then here is the potential person. So when we've asked employers what they value and what they need, I don't think any of this is a surprise to anyone. They want motivated employees who are excited about the business and their work. They want candidates with skill sets that can add value to their workforce. And they want business solutions that improve their productivity and workflow. Right? I think that's fairly common sense. It doesn't mean that when we say skill set, it doesn't mean that people have to know everything, but they have to be willing to learn, right? So here's some quotes from some people in decision-making roles in companies, specifically around kind of disability initiatives. Do not approach employers with a charitable appeal. They just want people who can do the job. So this is the woman, former VP of Human Resources in IDG Communications. Treat this like any other business decision. You can do it for economic reasons, and it's a great way to access good, productive employees. But the COO of Prologis, Christine Shadich, I don't know how you say that. So now we're going to get into creating a proposal. Who's ever created a proposal when they've gone into an employer? Has anybody done that before? Well, I'm going to give you some ways to do it, kind of a little bit. And it doesn't have to be formal, right? You can do it informally. And I'm going to give you some examples. So this is another one that Transcend provided and we worked with. So similar, right, about what his file said. He had autism, he was impulsive and uncooperative, he had inappropriate behaviors, poor social skills. He had worked in shipping and stocking positions, and he had basic math and reading. When they went through discovery, what they figured out is that he was really good at clerical and computers. He really likes being physical and building things. He likes structured, consistent tasks. He really hates being interrupted, and he's brutally honest, meaning he probably said things that people didn't always want to hear, right? We all know, I've met a person or two that's like that. So when they were doing some work in behalf of Bob, they went to a place called the Exploratorium, and this is in San Francisco. And they, talked to the woman that, at this Exploratorium, and these are some of the quotes that she said. We have shipments that come in 3 times a week. We can't get in the room for 2 days after. We have people with master's degrees bagging rocks. The office is a mess. We get all these printed catalogs. We just got the website orders given to my department. We don't have anyone to process them. Inventory is around the corner. It just moved. I'm afraid to open the door. These are all the things that they heard when they went to do an informational interview. And the reason that they went there to this Exploratorium is because they learned that he likes physical jobs. He likes building things. And he had worked in doing kind of shipping and stocking. And, you know, this place was maybe something that had a good fit. So what they did is they looked at ways that they could look at what Bob could offer, and then their ideas with a potential task list. So they took features to benefits. So they based it on what the employer needed and then what his skill set was. So based on employer needs and then your job seeker skill set. So it helps an employer to focus on job tasks, not job postings or existing positions. It demonstrates how a person with a disability can add value to their workforce. That should say not can add, not can be, can add, sorry. I look at these things 1,000 times and then I still find errors. Can add value to their workforce. So I'm going to show you some examples of what that looks like. So I gave you the example, right? I'm giving you the case scenario with Bob. So task lists get the employer thinking, right, about the tasks, not just the job posting. You're speaking the employer's language. So you're using their jargon, their terms, use specific job tasks. You want to list the most important tasks first. Which tasks are going to have the greatest impact? So you're thinking about what you see, and then what really needs to get done. So here's an example. I know that's kind of small. Let's see if I don't think I can make that any bigger. Can you guys see that okay? So at this potential task at the museum store, they were thinking that Bob could do online order fulfillment, and that included downloading online orders, packing and shipping orders, processing credit card payments, processing incoming merchandise, inventorying and organizing backstock area, setting up restocking retail store, inventorying and managing shipping supplies, data entry, and then filing. They list the specific tasks with filing. So vendor contracts, accounts paid, packing slips, price lists, collating literature and merchandise for events and sales. So they came up with the things that the task list that needed to be done that weren't getting done or that seemed to be overwhelming. Then they came up with a cost savings analysis. So this particular, right, she said they had people with master's degrees bagging rocks. That's not going to be the case in every scenario, and we'll talk about that. So you want to estimate cost savings by not utilizing high trained staff to do basic routine tasks. So projecting costs over a 5-year period, maybe looking at COLA adjustments. You may not even have to go out 5 years. So for job seekers that may have a more significant disability, there may not be as much of a cost savings, but you would maybe want to hire, you might want to emphasize other benefits, whether it's detail oriented, or you're pulling out specific tasks that people don't have time to do, whatever it is, right, that you're highlighting that's going to be done. High level of customer service, really kind of highlighting what that person's going to bring. Not everything is about productivity. We know that. So, they went from when they went to this exploratorium, even though they said that they weren't hiring, but then they kept hearing all these things that weren't getting done. And so they followed up by creating this task list and proposal. So Bob had the skills and attributes that the employer valued. He is extremely interested in the business, or this exploratorium. He is one of them, meaning that he's busy. He likes to, be involved. He's physical, by making him be more about the culture and the workplace and fitting in, it minimizes the disability. The job developer identified needs and then presented a cost-effective solution to the employer's issues or problems. So they helped the employer understand how to use his skills and then accommodate his disabilities. So, they really kind of showed how he could help them, and then ways that what kind of accommodations he needed, right? Where he was maybe, he had autism, he had, so he was direct, he didn't like to be interrupted. So those are the pieces that the coach helped the employer with. So this is an example of the cost savings analysis. So again, I know this is really, really small, and I just kind of copied it. So this is Jennifer White from Able Opportunities out of Seattle has created this template, and you can do the math it's fairly easily. So merchandise processor at 20 hours a week. So if the warehouse manager is being paid $22 an hour, and then the merchandise processing position is $13.75, right? It's just showing you the savings. If this person is spending 20 hours a week doing these tasks, what the savings looks like over time. So that specifically was how they were trying to show the cost savings by having this carved out position. So if this is something that you end up wanting to do, I'm happy to help you figure out how to do it.
It's not selling, but it's selling, right? Kind of, you know what I mean?
A little bit, because you're basically, you're being a solution. It's a solution. You're providing a consultation.
Would want that.
Right, because selling is just, a sales pitch to me is more like you're just saying, here, just, hire this person.
I totally understand. I like the solution, and I do like that better. But I'm just saying, then you come and it's like, wow, they care about if you took that time for my business, you'd have my attention.
Right. Well, people do it all the time, right? They come in and they say, hey, who's doing your, who's cleaning your office building? And they say, oh, we have so-and-so do it. But we haven't been really happy. So if you wanted to give us a bid, sure, come in and, let us know. But, oh, we actually really like these people. We may be paying a little bit more. We trust them. They're personable. We don't want to, whatever, that happens all the time, right? So there is an element of sales, but you're being more detailed in terms of the research that you're doing. And again, you're not doing this with every single person.
Right,
it's how you're negotiating or creating a position. Specifically say you were doing a resource ownership. So say somebody was purchasing a, I don't know. My brain is tired. I don't know, say somebody was adding a cotton candy machine to their where would you have a cotton candy machine? Would be a terrible idea. I know, a trampoline place, because you need sugar and jumping at the same time, right? So you
it would be a bad idea, Tricia, at the pink insulation you put in your walls. If you had a cotton candy machine in a place where you stored the pink, fiberglass insulation, that would be a bad idea, because I see that becoming problematic as somebody eating
You're right.
the pink insulation.
Or you wouldn't want a high sugar cotton candy machine in a surgery room where they're doing brain surgery.
Right.
Or in, sorry, like when they show like
Steady
an ice
nerves.
cream shop next door to a diabetic clinic of some kind, you know?
Yeah,
Right. Like all the,
Something like that, yeah.
yeah, something terrible where,
next to a dentist,
right. I mean, maybe that would actually make sense.
in
I
a
don't-
dentist's office, no cotton candy. Or maybe you would want that because
Well,
that would
you know,
increase
maybe-
business.
Say, I don't know, say that like that whole, like, gosh, people keep saying that they wish we had this. You know, and you're going to operate it, and it's going to generate revenue and it's yours or whatever it might be. You would have to show, you know, like what that would look like in terms of the profits, the wages, right, that would create for that person when they're there. And then, right, also the percentage that, you know, if other people were going to operate it when they weren't there, what that would look like, you know, so you'd have to be creating some of those kind of analysis. So, right, there's definitely situations where you would want to create it, and we could certainly, you know, come up with that. My brain's too tired to come up with. Maybe it's like if you're making dog biscuits, or, you know, I'm all things dog right now. So maybe you're selling puppy ice cream along with the ice cream truck. I don't know what it is. But you know, you're identifying something that's not being met, that you can add value to. And I have some other examples of some negotiating businesses I will pull up and show you in just a moment. But I want to get to the VR counselor piece real quick. And Jason, if you want to jump in at any point, feel free. So I just pulled these from the form, but we can also pull up the form. Here's the link to it here. So you can see that these are very similar to what we went through with the tenants. They're not quite as involved, right, as far as the plus and, you know, adding with exemplary. But it's really asking those questions. Did you, are the duties negotiated? Are the hours, the work scheduler hours, you know, do they meet the client and the business needs as you identified in the staging record and the profile? Did the employment specialist negotiate performance expectations? Does the job setting reflect the ideal work conditions as you identified in the staging record? Is it mutually beneficial? Is it connected to one of the three themes? Right, so I don't think Jason just made these things up when he came up with the form. He might have, I don't know. Thin air, grabbing out of thin air.
Yep. I just pulled them out of thin air. No, I did not.
Anyway,
Okay. I used the tenants to develop that form. And just so you guys know, the form, I mean, you can look at it, but I expect an explanation. There's yes, no check boxes, but there's an expectation that the CRP will fill in those explanation boxes, describing, how they did that. So when it talks about negotiating the job duties, those that turn this in, they explain it pretty well. I mean, I should be able to read it and understand that they went into the company and, they identified 4 areas that could be considered job duties, and they, built this job from nothing. I don't want to see something that says, oh yeah, they had an open position, right? Because I'm going to say, well, that's probably not going to meet it, but those explanation boxes will be filled in, and if they're not, I send it back. If they're not filled in satisfactorily, I send it back. And I work with the CRP on getting it filled out correctly and appropriately so that it's easy to see that, yes, this is customized. And if it turns out it's not customized, which I haven't had one yet, but if it turns out it's not, then we'll just say, hey, it's actually not customized. They'll just get paid at the lower rate. So it's not terrible. If they don't customize it, they shouldn't expect to get paid for it, but that's basically what it looks like. And then you can see my signature there. So I'll work with VR counselors too. Like I'll go through this, and once it looks pretty good to me, I basically will, I think I share it with the VR counselor, and I'll ask them to look at it and see if they have any concerns or make sure everything's accurate. The thing that usually gets changed up most is just that hours per week of, where the CRP reported a number of hours and the counselor thought they were working a different number of hours. Other than that, usually counselors look at it and they go, yeah, this is what my understanding of the job is. And at that point, that's when I would print this out, sign it, and then I send it to all parties involved and approve it.
Anybody have any questions about this? I love that you can have the areas to explain. The first one that I kind of supported a provider through, it was helpful, right? Because the counselor was really struggling to believe that it was customized. And so being able to really go in and be able to describe that in the narrative was key. I know you guys aren't here yet, but I think just knowing that, Jason really does want to make sure and have that dialogue and understanding with you. And again, it's not bad if it's not a customized position. It's just, if it's not, there's a difference in terms of the payment structure.
Well, mostly what I end up doing is, excuse me, is helping the CRP better explain and describe what they did to confirm that it was customized. One of our CRPs, I think I've gotten 4 of these from them in about the last year or so. And their last one was, just head and shoulders better than the first one that they sent me. So they just got better at being able to explain how they negotiated things, who they negotiated with, how the job duties, met the employer's needs as well as the client's skills and abilities and things. It's just being able to describe it well, explain it well. Like I said, I haven't had one yet where we decided it was not customized, because they all have been.
Nice. That's encouraging, right? I think it shows that by having that outlined and knowing what the expectation is, that people are, that clarity is helping. Okay. Okay, so really kind of key takeaways, right, is that the whole purpose of discovery is to figure out where someone is at their best and have opportunities to learn and grow in their career. And when you get stuck, or you just, that you're always going back and revisiting key pieces of information in the process to, it'll keep the focus on the job seeker and the vocational themes. And know that your tendency, because you've been doing, even if you're newer, I think the tendency might be to, to do some of the traditional job development methods, to kind of go back and keep revisiting who is this person and where are they at their best, and keep that focus on the vocational themes. And always too is that, customized employment is a collective process. You cannot do this by yourself and do it well. You have to reach out. You have to, get get a team of people around you. If you don't have a team, that's what we're for. Whether it's shooting an email, sending a text, hey, I'm stuck. What do you think about this idea? Who do you know that does this? I'm thinking this person has a theme in, this area. What are some ideas or places or activities that you think could refine that a little bit? I am always here to help. Kelly and Aubrey are brilliant, as is Jason. We're always happy to jump on and brainstorm with you. I still reach out to them all the time when I'm stuck or just needing a different word or a different frame of mind or just thinking a little bit differently. And those employment planning meetings are absolutely essential, whether you pull that person's team together or you, like I said, pull in other people to get some ideas and generate things. I really, really encourage you, don't ever let discovery go past 6 months. It's just, it gets to be too long for people. They'll get discouraged. You get discouraged.
It starts to lose its value once it's like spread out over a long period of time. You're just the way discovery works is it's kind of like you need to collect the information and start utilizing it within a like time frame, and just to stretch that out we've just not had success.
Yeah, I think people start losing faith in the process if it gets drug out. And I understand that sometimes things happen, right? Whether it's COVID or, you know what I mean? But to your very, very best, if you can, really try hard to get discovery done in, 3 months. And, even if you like, when you do your home visit, if you get in the habit of scheduling your planning meetings 3 months later, and if you have to reschedule it, if that's kind of your practice of, I'm going to be committed and get this done, and you kind of hold everybody accountable to getting it done in that time frame, having to reschedule and push it out is better than never, scheduling, the end. So those are just kind of some bits of advice as you move forward to really keep that sense of urgency. And I know it's hard when you have other things that kind of keep, getting put on your plate that you don't have control over. I know it's a hard time right now. So don't hear me telling you that if you don't, you suck and fail, but it really is important to keep a sense of urgency about it, to be doing it well. So that's really the bulk of the content that I have for today. And so at this point, we've had our one-on-one meetings as far as where you're at with your staging record. So you should be wrapping up any pieces of the staging record that you needed to complete, whether it was another activity or an informational interview or the writing, and then getting your employment planning meetings scheduled with your team. So if you'll let me know when those are happening, and then so I can do a final review, that's pretty much where we are. So hopefully you can get those wrapped up in the next like 3 weeks or so. So if you want to wait until school is back in, if you're working with a student, that is perfectly fine. And I encourage you to do that. If a person's school team is really, really vital to where you're getting information and where you're going to go next, if you need to push that into September, that's perfectly fine. And I encourage you to do so. To me, the planning meeting going a couple weeks later is more important, and having good engagement from the team members is more important than it being directly within the time of the course. I don't know how you feel about that, Jason, but it was kind of right on that cusp of when school starts. And it's tough, right, to get it in that first week of school. I know it's tough for educators. So if you need to push it into the first couple of weeks of September, that's okay too. Any questions or thoughts or things you feel like you want to know more about, or stuff you're worried about, or
If we want to watch this all over again, how's that? How do we do that?
I will send you the recording as soon as
I think I love the fact of knowing it's recorded, you know, and to revisit it a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, specifically this one's recorded. I have not recorded every session. I have previously.
But I like the idea.
And then of course everything's on the Padlet as far as the discovery guidance documents. And
Like the free conversations that we have, you know, that come up during our training when we're talking, and it's fun to, I mean, sometimes that's helpful to go back and go, oh, you know, the conversations that were had and some of the things that you talk about.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.